Hello, and welcome to the Movie Universe. I'm your host, Movie Fan. Today, in the words of Comic Book Guy, you are about to see the worst Dare to Compare ever! Because today, I will be comparing two of the most gut-wrenching movies in the history of Hollywood, Batman and Robin and Green Lantern. Why am I doing this? Well, everybody talks about these two films, but as far as I know, no one has ever tried to compare the two to find out which one is the worst one ever made. And so, I dare to compare. Let's get started before I come to my senses. Now, for this Dare to Compare, I don't need to tell you the story because we all know the stories between both of these films, and we all know how terrible they are. But in order to try to compare the two, I'm going to have to compare the plots, the special effects, the characters, the works. And when I compare all this stuff, I'm going to be tallying up all the numbers as to what's bad and how bad. And then we will have our answer. We're going to start with characters. However, this is going to technically be twofold, because in order to talk about characters, you have to talk about writers at the same time. Maybe not just individually, but it all ties in. You'll see what I mean in a minute. In Batman and Robin, obviously, we got the bad end of the stick here when George Clooney was chosen to play Batman. Because the way he banters with Robin, it just doesn't feel right. He keeps talking about wanting to be that loner once again. And let's not forget, in Batman Forever, Robin more than proved himself to be a worthy sidekick. To make matters worse, Robin is starting to get a bit of a swelled head because he's acting like a child going, I want a car. And he's constantly whining to Batman saying that Batman doesn't trust him, which is actually true. He doesn't really seem to trust him at all, which is a serious flaw in both their characters because Batman, he trusted Robin with his life in the comic books, as well as the various TV shows that came before the movies. And of course, in Batman Forever, he was willing to give Robin a chance. And if that's not trust, then I don't know what is. In Green Lantern, Hal Jordan is just so bland. To make matters worse, he starts off as your cocky character. He's just an airplane pilot with a big ego, which is completely untrue to the comic. Because Hal Jordan wasn't a cocky character. Now, if you wanted to talk about Johnny Storm from Fantastic Four, he was a cocky character, but not Hal Jordan. And if you think about it, that really contradicts the reasons as to why the Ring chooses him. Because the Ring chooses the right person for the job. Do you really think the Ring would choose someone who's cocky and has a huge ego to be a Green Lantern? And yes, I know later in the comics there have been a few versions where Hal Jordan becomes drunk with power and turns evil. But that happens way later, not before. And there is one thing I should address, and that's the fact that Ryan Reynolds was chosen to be Hal Jordan, who is the Green Lantern. At that time, all he did was comedies. Now, I remember a love story that he did somewhere either before or during, but nobody ever cared about that. And to transfer from comedies to action films, that's a very huge transition, and you know how it is. Obviously, he was typecasted before that, so to try to break that mold is extremely difficult. And the sad thing is, he actually is trying, but the script he was given to work with was obviously his fatal flaw. That and a few other things, but we'll get into that later. That pretty much sums up our main characters, so we'll move on to the rest of the cast. For Batman and Robin, one character that everybody loves to bash was Mr. Freeze. As we all know, Mr. Freeze was played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and in this case, they have Mr. Freeze do all these puns and one-liners, which as we all know, Arnold is famous for the one-liners. But Mr. Freeze was not the type of character to do one-liners, and to make matters worse, they had him do puns, and that just was not what Mr. Freeze was all about. And plus, that's not what Arnold is all about either. It just makes people cringe to watch him do ice puns. Like, chill out and stay cool and all that stuff. I'm not kidding. He does nothing but ice puns 90% of the time. Even close to the very end, he says, take 2 of these and call me in the morning. You remember that old doctor's joke? Well, he does it. And that's a key thing here because Mr. Freeze was a real tragic character because of his wife's cancer and how he was trying to find a cure for her and how he ended up the way he did. He was a character that, he was a villain, but you really felt sorry for him. For this Mr. Freeze, I want to sympathize with him because of his wife's cancer, but I don't feel sorry for him. I know it's terrible, but I just cannot feel sorry for a character who keeps making all these puns. And of course, we have Poison Ivy, who is played by Uma Thurman. Now, I've made no secret. I hate Uma Thurman. I think she's a pathetic actress, and I don't think she's an attractive woman at all. I really don't. Those of us who've read the comics or seen the animated series, we all know that Poison Ivy was a real seductive character, a real beautiful character. She was wicked, but she was drop-dead gorgeous. Uma Thurman is not. And of course, she made so many puns just like Arnold did. It was just sad. I mean, my vines have a real crush on you. Oh my god, you gotta be kidding me. It's one thing to do puns in a 1966 setting, but it's quite another to do them now. And of course, I gotta mention Batgirl. She's not really given much of a part in this at all. Plus, they ruined her character. She's arrogant, she's troublemaking, she's pretty much a stereotypical teenage rebel. And they turned her into a hacker, which she wasn't in the comic books. At least not when she was Batgirl. I know what the origin of the hacking thing was. It was clearly based off of The Killing Joke when she became paralyzed from the waist down, and she ended up becoming her own different type of superhero called Oracle. What she does is she hacks into computers and technology and tries to help other superheroes any way she can by giving them the information as to where the villains have gone, where they've struck, and of course be able to operate security systems and that sort of thing. You could say she was like Professor Xavier without the psychic powers. And there was nothing wrong with that. That was quite an inspiration to a lot of people. But the thing is, for the comics, that had a purpose. Because when she couldn't become Batgirl anymore, she became a different type of hero. Here, there is no purpose. And of course, they did the most god-awful thing that should have never been done. She's not Commissioner Gordon's daughter in this one. She's Alfred's niece. That has been set in stone for the longest time, that Batgirl Barbara Gordon is Commissioner Gordon's daughter, not Alfred's niece. They should have not done that. That was unforgivable, inexcusable, and completely untrue to the comics. And as for Bane, there's not much to say about him, except that for some reason he doesn't talk much. He usually only says one word like business or bomb. However, I do got to say this. They actually got him right. He is pumped up on Venom, just like in the comics. And he is basically what he was, a steroid freak. So for once, they actually got something right here. As for the rest of the cast members of Green Lantern, I don't have much to say. As for character profiles, that is. For Sinestro, he does feel right to me. He feels like Hal Jordan is not worthy to own the ring, and that's pretty true to the comics. The problem is they make him such a dark, twisted type character that was clearly a setup for a sequel when he would obviously become the next villain. The problem with that is it was too soon to try to really put that in there. Kilowog, he was actually done right. He looked proper, and he was a big, burly kind of guy. The kind of guy who would just go in there swinging, as well as use his ring. He was tough, he was gritty, straight out of the comics. In fact, that's the only character they got right in this whole thing. You know, I'm beginning to see a weird pattern here, because two of the buffest characters in both comics are done right in these movies, while the rest of them are done wrong. Is it a coincidence? I don't know. So taking these things into account, obviously the winner of this round is Batman and Robin, because all the characters are not true to the comic books at all. At least with Green Lantern, we had a couple characters who actually were true to what they were supposed to be. And plus, Ryan Reynolds was actually trying. Whereas for the characters in Batman and Robin, I don't think they're trying at all. And once again, Uma Thurman! And I'm sure you've probably figured out by now that really we all know who's to blame for this. The writers. The writers did the character profiles completely wrong because all except for two on both sides were not what they were supposed to be. Of course, I will say Sinestro was pretty close, but they tried to set up that possibility of him becoming the next villain way too quickly. And it's because of these issues with the character profiles, I wonder if the writers even read any of the comic books. And it's because I really don't think the writers even did their research at all that I have to give this one a tie. So the winner of this round goes to Batman and Robin and Green Lantern. Now we're going to move on to another key point here, the plots. For Batman and Robin, it's your stereotypical plot that Poison Ivy and Mr. Freeze are running rampant in the city along with Bane, trying to take over a few things. Mr. Freeze, he's stealing all kinds of diamonds and trying to find a cure for his wife's cancer. They even show the origin story as to how he became Mr. Freeze. Now, granted, his name was actually Dr. Victor Freeze, but while he was working on his wife's cancer, something happens in the lab which causes him to fall into a bed of what I presume was liquid nitrogen. And instead of killing him, it alters his body temperature, where he cannot survive in warm climates. He has to be in cold climates from now on. So therefore, he constructs a suit that basically keeps him cold. And he turns to villainy mostly to raise funds to cure his wife's cancer. That's straight out of the comics. Bane and Poison Ivy were technically created at the same time. Bane was a scientific experiment done by a professor, and Poison Ivy was the professor's assistant. She sees that he creates Bane, and, well, the professor, he tries to kill her by shoving her into a table full of all kinds of poison. Of course, she survives. She becomes a seductress whose lips are fused with venom, therefore being able to give the kiss of death. And since poison flows through her veins, she labeled herself Poison Ivy. And for some reason, Bane does whatever she says. He follows her around like a lackey, and he does whatever she tells him to. And the rest of it, it's the usual stuff. Batman's trying to stop them and all kinds of other stuff. And this is the biggest problem here. There are so many subplots in here that it is just downright ridiculous. We got the subplot of how Poison Ivy was trying to get Batman and Robin to turn against one another so they wouldn't be able to stop them. And we also got the subplot that Alfred's niece is basically a juvenile delinquent, just doing whatever she feels like, that kind of junk. And of course, Alfred's dying of some type of cancer that only Mr. Freeze has the cure for. And Robin is too busy trying to be his own man because he feels that Batman doesn't trust him. And there's Poison Ivy's crush on Mr. Freeze. For Green Lantern, the plot is very straightforward. Hal Jordan gets the ring, he goes through training, and he tries to destroy Parallax. Because of this, there's nothing more I could say about Green Lantern, plot-wise. And because Green Lantern had such a straightforward plot, and Batman and Robin had too many subplots in there, the winner of this round is Batman and Robin. Now let's talk about the special effects. For Batman and Robin, the special effects are actually pretty awesome. They're pretty much all practical effects except for a few things, like when Mr. Freeze's gun shoots. But everything else looks great. The Batmobile looks awesome. That weird other Batmobile thing that I don't know what the heck that was supposed to be, even though I don't get that vehicle, that actually does look pretty cool. I like Robin's motorcycle, and Mr. Freeze's freeze gun looks pretty awesome. As for the costumes, well, we got quite a few problems here. And we all know what that is. Bat nipples. We see them on Batman. We see them on Robin. We even see them on Batgirl. The funny thing, though, looking past that, Robin's costume is actually pretty cool. I love the red Robin on there. That was really awesome, but it should have had the letter R on there. However, in the end, where they're all suited up, for some reason the costumes look very much alike. Obviously, that was not a good idea, especially since there was a lot of highlight onto Batman and Robin's crotch there. And oh, so many times we keep getting ass shots of the costumes. Considering how that went, I'm surprised they didn't try to make a joke by putting up the classic Batman theme song and have it go, na 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 ass man. Normally I don't talk like that, but this time I'm making an exception. Mr. Freeze's costume? I'm not really impressed with it at all. It looks like they tried to make something cool, something similar to the comic book designs. The problem is, it just doesn't look right. It's way too shiny and bulky. Now, sure, we all know Arnold Schwarzenegger's a real big buff guy, but it still doesn't look right. And technically, that dome should cover his entire head, not leave an exposed face on him. I would think that would be dangerous for a guy like him who cannot survive in warm temperatures. Bane's costume is not much better. I don't understand why his arms are green and yellow. And the mask looks pathetic. I know it's supposed to look like a Mexican wrestling mask, but this thing looks kind of downright creepy for some reason. The eyes are just too big on it. The mouth looks real messed up. And there's too many tubes going into the back of his head. It should just be one tube. Of course, the worst costumes are Poison Ivy's. Her costumes are just god awful. They are absolutely ridiculous. We got a red costume. We got this costume. It just doesn't look right. Pretty much all but one of them do not even look like they're supposed to. Poison Ivy is supposed to be like this. And again, I'm going to say it. What is up with her hair? Poison Ivy never looked like this. She looked like this. Although I got to admit, there was one part where she first introduces herself as Poison Ivy. That actually looked right. But the rest of the way, no. It's just very cheesy looking costumes and the hair. The city of Gotham, of course, is real practical effects there. Very well made, too. It actually looks like a real city. As for Green Lantern, and this is where the you-know-what really hits the fan. Literally everything and the kitchen sink is made out of CGI. His costume is made out of CGI. His ring is made out of CGI. The buildings are made out of CGI. The pathetic excuse for a villain, which is clearly a ripoff of Galactus from Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Nothing is real here at all, except for the people. And that's one of the things that most people cannot stand about this movie, is the fact that literally everything was CGI, especially his suit. The suit is just oozing all kinds of green flashes, which just isn't true at all. And plus, it was all CGI. Even his mask was CGI. What a joke. One of the best things about superhero movies, and in fact, it's pretty much the last special effect that's practical anymore, is having real costumes to wear. They're not always practical, but they're real. They're actually wearing them. They're actually on their bodies. That's one of the things that people look forward to. Now, sure, there have been some exceptions like Venom, but that is a completely different story altogether. Venom can transform his body at will and do all kinds of stuff with his symbiote powers. Green Lantern just wears a costume and has a powerful ring that can do whatever he wants it to do. I can understand using the CG for the ring. That makes perfect sense. But the costume shouldn't have been CG at all. But believe it or not, the CGI costume is not the worst thing in this movie. The real worst thing is Tomar-Re. I'm sure there isn't a fan of Green Lantern who doesn't know about Tomar-Re. He's one of the most unique-looking characters in the comics. Obviously, he's a humanoid fish. He's got a big sail on the top of his head and a beak like a bird. That's what makes him so unique. He always makes an appearance in one form or another. Whether it be Superman, the animated series, he made an appearance there. Justice League Unlimited. He even made an appearance on an episode of Duck Dodgers. So obviously, he's a very recognizable character. So it makes sense as to why he would be in the movie. And obviously, judged by the looks of this, I wish they didn't do it, because he looks hideous. His skin looks extra scaly beyond belief. I know he's a humanoid fish, but seriously, those aren't scales. Those are crevices. I feel like I'm looking at the Arizona desert during the dry season. You know, where you got those huge cracks in the dirt? And his beak, oh my god. Obviously, it's based off of a parrotfish. And that's where things really go wrong, because obviously, they tried to make him look way too real. And the problem with that is, when you try to make a unique-looking character like this look too real, it ends up looking like garbage. Especially considering the fact that, you know, he's just a character that was created out of a comic book. We don't want him to look that real. We don't want him to look like a mutated parrotfish. We want him to look, well, something like this. Because at least like this, he looks cool. He looks like a character that you want to know more about. Whereas for here, he looks like a guy you want to run away from, because, oh my god, he's horrible. And I'll tell you another thing that doesn't help is the fact that clearly this CGI is cheap. Now, this was probably the toughest call I had to make, because both sides have such horrible special effects. Batman has a little bit more going for it, with the fact that you got some cool special effects for the Batmobile and whatever that vehicle was, and Robin's motorcycle, but still, the bat nipples, the ass shots, Mr. Freeze's costume, Poison Ivy's costume, Bane's costume. There's a lot of bad going on here except for the Batmobile and the city of Gotham. And with Green Lantern, everything is cheap CGI, including his costume, and oh my god, Tomar-Re. Oh. It really was a tough decision. And truth be told, I think both special effects are equally bad. So the winner is Batman and Robin, and Green Lantern. Now I think it's time we tally this up. The winner of this booby prize is Batman and Robin. With the combination of bad special effects, too many subplots, bad characters, and bad writers, it's a no-brainer. At least with Green Lantern, you had a couple characters who were trying to fill their roles. And yes, there's no denying it had the worst special effects in history, but at least it didn't have all these subplots which got in the way of the story. Plus, at least it didn't have Uma Thurman and bat nipples and bat asses all over the place. So once again, the winner of this booby prize is Batman and Robin. And because of this, I can officially deem this movie as
the worst movie ever!
I hope you enjoyed this little dare to compare, because I'll tell you this, it was not a pleasure to do, but I think it was worth the effort in the end. Normally I don't ask this of anybody, but I think this is a comparison that needs to be out there. So if you can, I would appreciate if everyone tries to spread this video out all over the internet. I want this baby to go viral, so people can actually see and compare for themselves. Plus, I would like to hear some feedback on this. This is Movie Fan, signing off.